Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Carol Arthur, and I lead DAP's work to heal lives broken by family violence. Many of you have heard me speak before, and some of you know that my passion for this work comes in part as a result of my experience as a child. I remember how powerless I felt as my father, in a drunken rage, threw a plate of food at my mom. He then flipped the kitchen table over, and I remember seeing the fear on her face as he lunged at her. I felt terrified. I was shaking, and I felt sick to my stomach. Each time I see a child walk into DAP for the first time, casting an anxious glance towards their mother, I'm immediately transported back to that kitchen, and I feel again that stab of utter powerlessness. Now, I've been fortunate because as the leader of an agency that helps families heal, I do have power. I have the power to work with talented and dedicated staff to shape programs that ongoing evaluation tells us stops domestic violence and creates safety plans. I have the power to work with public policymakers, with police, prosecutors, probation officers, with judges and child protection workers, with teachers and clergy to develop effective ways for our community to prevent domestic violence and intervene appropriately when it happens. I have the power to reach each of you to help you understand why he hits, why she doesn't leave, and how that child cowering in the kitchen feels. And I have the power to ask you for your help in helping families heal. Most child witnesses of domestic violence are not so fortunate. They don't grow up to be the executive director of the Domestic Abuse Project. Instead, the likelihood is all too high that Abby, having seen her mother cater to every whim of her father in order to avoid violence happening again, believes that it's love when her boyfriend demands that she quit seeing her friends so she can spend more time with him. Or that Jim, after years of watching his dad hit his mom and swearing, "I'll never do that," looks in disbelief at his hand after he's hit his wife. I'm going to ask each of you to help me for a moment, if you would. Would you all please just stand? I'd like you to look around the room. Every one of you represent one man who's participated in DAP's Men's program each year. Every year, we see nearly 500 men in our program. Now, I'd like tables 1 through 5 to please be seated. Now, look around the room again. Those of you who are still standing, those are the men who come to DAP for help, who have been child witnesses of domestic violence. Thank you. Please be seated. The self-hate, confusion, and fear that afflict child witnesses last long beyond childhood. A boy who witnesses abuse as a child is twice as likely to end up abusing his wife and his children. But I know because I see it happen every day, that it doesn't have to be like that. We can change it. Every day, I see our advocates help victims in crisis, finding them food, shelter, clothing for their children, translating from Spanish to English, Somali to English, legal jargon to English. Last year, DAP advocates helped 3,800 victims in crisis by writing orders for protection, joining them at court hearings, by listening to them. Listening, understanding, supporting, and offering real concrete help. And while our advocates help families that are in crisis following an assault, our therapists help families to make long-term sustainable change. We work with every member of the family to understand the root causes of abuse, to end the abusive behavior, to develop safety plans and build healthy, loving relationships. We've conducted follow-up interviews with our clients for over 25 years now. Consistently, these interviews indicate to us that 90%, and sometimes more than 90% of the women and children who are in our program develop safety plans that they can use to protect themselves. Consistently, more than 75% of the men who complete our program remain nonviolent. I see this every day, real, substantive change that lasts, that heals families and lays the groundwork to rebuild lives. But I worry. I worry because the challenge today is steeper than ever before. Economic pressures weigh on all of us. And while that stress is not the cause of abuse, it often makes it worse with incidents that are more frequent and more severe. Funding cuts have led many agencies to discontinue their family violence programs, bringing even more families coming to DAP for help. And DAP's own funding pressures have required us to reduce staff this year. I worry because we have a $150,000 gap in our budget this year. DAP is building a bridge to safety for so many families, and we have what it takes to get most of the way there. But most of the way is not good enough for a bridge. It's not good enough for our families. If we fail to close this gap, Jerome will not learn to take a time out instead of using his fist. Monica will have no one to help her understand the court system. And Ricky will continue to believe that the abuse is his fault. If we fail to close this DAP gap, I'll have to tell 500 victims in crisis that there's no DAP advocate to help them. I'll have to turn away 80 men seeking to end their abuse. I'll have to tell 20 women that they'll have to keep themselves as safe as they can. And I'll have to leave 35 children and adolescents believing that violence is normal and part of love. But with your help, we can close the gap. We can build that bridge to safety.